Greetings, everyone. This is a quick primer on how to enter a service transaction into HMIS. Now, typically, service transactions are entered into clients that have a current entry into your project. So these are folks that you've entered and have not yet exited. It's going to be your main current client roster. And service transactions, they sort of run the gambit in terms of what we use them for. Some agencies they use service transactions to record rent that's been paid out, to record just any kind of funds that were provided to the client. Others use service transactions to designate when they actually encountered the client. So if the client gives you a call, then you create a service transaction. If the client swings by the office, then you create a service transaction. It really it really depends on how your agency wants to utilize service transaction data. Now, service transaction data, it's really important because it helps us know when you last interacted with your client, and it's a relatively quick way to document your last interactions and the services you've provided to the client. So let's go ahead and look into it. Now, I have a client who's currently entered into my project. I know his client number, so I'll just go ahead and enter 222. And here we have Mr. Bob Hoskins. And so you can see that Mr. Bob Hoskins currently has an emergency shelter entry into my project. And what I want to do is set up a service transaction that shows that I provided him with case management services. So what I will do is go ahead, go to service transactions. I will click on view entire server. I'm sorry, I'll click on add service. And now, if you remember, this screen should look similar to you if you are an HMIS user. Up here, if this is a multi-person household, you can go ahead and check off the rest of the family if you'd like. It really depends on the type of service, right? If it is just one person that you're working with, relatively simple. But if it is a family that you're providing rent to, then you may want to show that you've provided that service to that entire family. So under here for the service provider, you'll click your drop down. And let's say that it is my All Chicago project. So it's my All Chicago Emergency Shelter project. You have to select the provider. And one thing I want to make note to you all is show you that if I were to select all, so let's take a look at what I have in terms of the services I can provide as through my emergency shelter project. So when I click on service type, here we have these services that I can provide. So let's see what happens when I change it over to the PSH project. Now I have a different set of services. Now let's see what happens when I change it to rapid rehousing. I have even more different. I have even differing set of services here than I had with the other two projects. So another thing to notice is that the provider specific service is also changed. Now, for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to say that I have an emergency shelter and I have done some case management with this client. So in this instance, I'm just going to say emergency shelter. I'll click on my service type and I can choose from one of these. And what I'll do is click on case care management. Now, what happens if none of these are familiar or if you have very little and they're not applicable to the services that your agency provides? Well, you can go ahead and click on lookup. And let's say you want to provide a bus ticket or something of that sort. You would look there, and here we have a service for bus fare. So at this point, you could click on select. However, I want to encourage everyone, if you do have services that you offer regularly that you would like to be able to track in HMIS, shoot us an email at hmis@allchicago.org or submit a ticket and let us know what services are actually pertinent to your project, and we can have them available on this drop down. So again, we can change the drop down for you if you'd like, so you don't have to go through the lookup process all the time. Just shoot us an email at hmis@allchicago.org. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and say that the service provider will be All Chicago's emergency shelter because that's where my client is currently enrolled, and the service type is going to be case care management. Uh, and I do not have to worry about the provider specific service. So I'll click on save and continue. And here we go. So now I have recorded my service. Now notice here you can backdate the start date if you want. You can set an end date. So if you're paying rent or something like that, where maybe it's a month-long rent or back rent, whatever it may be, you can indicate what the start date and end date for those two are. And then you don't have to worry about the provider specific service, nor the service location, nor the service staff. You don't have to answer any of these. We do encourage you to put in notes just to give us a little bit of context, but for the most part, don't have to worry about notes either. And then job assignment start date, do not have to worry about this either. And service costs, I'm going to do another service transaction where I'll show you how to document funds. But in this instance, I just want to show that I had a case management session with my client. So I will be able to skip all of these, this apply funds for service, conditional commitment, support documentation. I don't have to follow up with any of that. And I can come all the way down here to the need status and notice that there are these need statuses that have CES or FHP in front of them. When you are documenting service transactions, you do not necessarily want to use any of these. So these are explicitly for coordinated entry related functions, and the FHP is specifically for flexible housing pool related functions, which are a very small pool of users in HMIS. So for most of the providers, what you're going to be indicating is that it is identified in progress, that the service transaction has been closed and met or closed and unmet. And that's relatively it. So what we are going to do, I'm going to say that this is closed and met, that we met with the client and the outcome of the need was met. All that we were doing is just meeting with them and setting up case management services. So here we go. I'll click on save and exit. And there we go. So now we have documentation that we provided a service today. Now, again, I just wanted to show you the process of documenting a service transaction. There are plenty of ways to be able to work with this and to be able to utilize this in a smart way for your agency so that you can get more data and more information about client engagements. And I will be showing you in a separate video how to document funds that are provided.